What's up guys, Kobe from Model Pranksters. Today I'm here with High-Res. We're in New York City. We're gonna show you how to order McDonald's like a boss. Hope you guys enjoyed the video.
You going?
You're next.
No, you got it.
No.
Can I get 2 Big Macs?
Okay.
2 apple pies? No, actually. Let me get 2 Big Macs and 2 apple pies, a little bit of Sprite in the side of fries. Let me get a McDouble, let me get a McChicken, hot sauce, make sure that shit kickin'. I want a McRib before I McPiss. Let me get a hash brown if it is a lunch head. If it is, I'ma be McSad and upset. Let me get some nuggets too. I want a bun cake and a parfait. 2 of them, I really had a hard day. Let me get a McCafe latte and a couple hundred large Shamrock shakes. Powerade, high C, ranch snack wrap on the side, please. Let me get a burger with a slice of cheese, but no onions or pickles, so hold that, please. I want a McFlurry, 2 of those, 1 M&M, 1 Oreos. I want everything on the dollar menu and a burger with jalapenos. Let me get a snack wrap for my backpack, better not tax that dust sauce, no after. Taking everything to go, so pack that in a black bag. High-Res eating all the flapjacks. Did you get all that?
Hope you guys enjoyed that video. Make sure you subscribe to High-Res. The link will be at the end of this video and at the top of the description. You don't want to miss him.
Okay, so obviously we know that most consumers do not go into McDonald's and order like that. And while it would be great, we need to acknowledge the fact that all of our consumers are different. So on a global level, McDonald's serves over 69 million consumers a day. That's a huge audience, and we need to understand how to differentiate between consumers to better market them to ultimately drive incremental guest counts and sales. So here, Sarah and I are going to talk a little bit more about how we balance the creative approach, knowing mobile is a huge piece of our business. The ability to connect with a consumer when they are 5 minutes away from the purchase decision is very powerful for our brand. So when we take a look back at the roadmap, right, we look in the 90s, late 90s, we have TV and digital, and there are really only a few measurement sources out there. ComScore and Nielsen really were the only 2 that actually could give us insight into how to understand consumers, but really not at a granular level. And when we think about that, it really was what we're calling strong guessing. When we take a look in early 2000s, social obviously came about, MySpace before Facebook, and even then there was limited data that came out of it. Mobile, even though it isn't to the extent it is today in terms of smartphones and the amount of apps and data that we can gather, it was the start of a new device that allowed us to connect with consumers on the go. Today in the present, really what we're calling the data-driven era, and this is really how we're terming it strong knowing. So there's a ton of data sources out there that help us better understand these consumers, but it's not going to end here. We need to look to the future, and the future really is going to be the addressable era. So how do we truly understand the consumer from a one-to-one marketing? So as we think about brand apps, data, loyalty programs, and really being able to message to the consumer based on their product affinity and brand affinity, as well as not marketing and messaging to those consumers that actually have no loyalty to my brand, right? So then we think about a cost per valuable impression. So how is data changing this? So no surprise, everyone in this room understands data and the mass amounts of data that we have, whether it be social, whether it be from your mobile technology partners, whether it be from those partners that are rooted in technology that allow us to message cross-device, or from just DSPs and the fact of how we're using them when we buy programmatically. As an example, if I were to try to target a millennial from 18 to 34, I can now tell through online and social behavior those that actually have affinity to burgers, right? Take it a step further. Now I can understand if they're within close proximity to a store or whether or not they're in home. And then as you layer on all this other additional third-party data, then I can truly understand if those consumers have an affinity to my brand or even to competitors. So it's all about getting smarter in terms of messaging to the consumer audience. So again, what this just means is consumers really are in the middle of this convergence. The media environment is fragmented. It's they're overwhelmed by the amount of messaging that goes on at any given moment, but yet they're in full control. Content is at their demand, whether it be over the top, whether it be on their mobile phone, whether it be tablets. They're the ones in charge, and as marketers, we need to at least acknowledge and realize that we have to message them in the most appropriate way to truly drive that conversion. From a McDonald's standpoint, We look at an always-on, real-time engagement approach. There's an opportunity to outsmart and stay ahead of our competitors, but we're not going to be able to do that if we don't take a look at data and insights to truly help understand how to message in the right way. And again, I know we talked about data and big data, and we all kind of laugh at this term now because it's actually becoming even really bigger data. But there's a lot of different ways that we can go about and actually gather this. You have your custom brand studies, you have third-party measurement, you have your panel-based insights, and really what this is at the end of the day is having the consumer at the core and making sure we understand them to truly make that connection, build that brand affinity, and ultimately drive incremental guest counts. But why? Why are we doing this? Why do we have a data-driven approach? And it's really for two reasons. One is to stay ahead of our competitors and make sure that we understand how our brand differentiates us from those in the marketplace. The other is ultimately eliminating waste. So as we think about media investment and the dollars we spend, how do we make sure we're messaging in the most effective way, but also most efficiently? So why would I want a message to someone that has no affinity to my brand whatsoever, but those that are in the switcher group that is based on convenience and I can use mobile to message them in real time? It's going to make the difference. And even, improving sales, 1% is massive for any given brand. So that's really why we focus on a data-driven approach as it relates to this overall media mix.
I'm going to go over here, give this side of the room some love, spread it out. So Amanda talked a lot about data and what that means from an agency perspective. So now I'm going to give you a little more insight into what that means from a data company perspective. So that slide that Amanda showed with all those different logos on it, that's what the agency people are dealing with. Like all this data, so much, how do we make sense of it? What do we do with it? So this is kind of like a day in the life of an engineer at InMobi. So we have 500 engineers that sit in India, and this is the data that they're dealing with and making sense of. 500 terabytes of data they're processing per day. They've been processing this data for 10 plus years. 13 billion signals they're processing every day. So of those 500 terabytes, 24 are new every single day. So we're getting those new signals from people. And we're processing almost 8 billion ad requests a day. So that's a ton of data. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around what that means. Me especially, I'm a very visual person. I need to see what does that really mean? So I think the best way to make sense of that is, how do we ingest that data? The best way to do that is categorize it, or what we call bucket it. So we bucket it in a lot of different ways, whether it's interest-based data, purchase-based data based on in-app purchases, demographic based on somebody's age, where they go in the real world. So these are just ways that we start to kind of what we call bucket or categorize that data, help our agencies and marketers be smarter and talk to people in a more efficient way. So there's a lot of different brands and agencies in the room, and publishers or networks that have worked with a lot of different brands and agencies. And I think the point here is that not every vertical uses data the same way. So for example, if you're trying to get your app downloaded and you have a very aggressive app download strategy, you're going to start broad and refine. We call it casting a wide net. You don't want to go too finite. You want to start broad, figure out who's converting, who's downloading your app, and then target from there. If you're a QSR like McDonald's, you want to go location. You want to hit people when they're close to your location. If you're a CPG, you're all about brand loyalty, brand affinity. You want to find people that have an affinity towards your brand, or at least your category of brands. So the point here is, on top of all this data, not every vertical uses it the same way, so we need to identify what vertical you're in and your strategy for how to best effectively use and make sense of data. So data, we talked a lot about that, but what's really driving engagement? And what's driving engagement is technology and creativity. So innovation means different things to everybody. I think if I polled every single one of you in this room, you'd have a different definition of what innovation means to you. Some brands have been in mobile for 10 plus years, and they're continuing to push the envelope and do very innovative things in the mobile space. For other brands, just being in mobile is innovative, and that's okay too. Every brand is at a different stage in their innovation process, so you just have to identify what that is for you, what innovation means to you, and how to best get there. For us at InMobi, we talk about innovation in a few different ways. We talk about creative innovation. We saw a lot of that through the JWT creative presentation yesterday, native ad formats. just ultimately having a better experience for the user through creative. And we also talk about it in terms of technology. So continuing to push the envelope in terms of technology and innovation, making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable for tracking in mobile, pushing the envelope in terms of creative and tracking what we're doing in that space, and building audiences and making us smarter that way as well. So that's a little bit of background on data and innovation, and now I'm going to hand it off to Amanda to talk about more of a practical case study of how we actually coupled those two things to see success for McDonald's specifically.
Okay, so obviously being a brick and mortar company with 14,000 stores, being able to connect with someone in that crucial time when they're deciding where to go for lunch or for breakfast is important for us. So we've been, I guess, playing within the real-time, location, proximity-based environment for probably 2.5 years now. So have gathered a lot of learnings over the years. How do we get smarter about it? I wouldn't say that we've perfected it. I think mobile in general is still somewhat undefined, and we're all learning and trying to figure it out. But when we compare performance for a banner or a mobile experience that doesn't have our lat and long overlay or GPS layering into it to truly map to store, our performance and engagement isn't that much higher. Now, granted, we can't fully map path to purchase, while yes, we're thinking about technology and there are things that will ultimately get us there to truly understand how we drive someone to store through mobile. We are seeing significantly higher engagements that hopefully are ultimately resulting with in-store sales. So again, scratching the surface on it, but I think the key takeaway here is as we think about mobile and being able to connect with someone in real time and show proximity to how close they are to a McDonald's is powerful. I know a lot of the discussion over the past few days was around accuracy of it and that it is not perfect by any means, and how do you truly define the right radius for a store. So for McDonald's, you know, your urban stores versus your suburban, night and day differences in terms of how we would market and what that right radius is, but these are all the things that we're thinking about. So as marketers and agencies in the room that truly are working on a retail standpoint, I'd say those are probably some of the biggest things that that we are challenged against, and I would, I guess, push back on you to think about that in a different way too, because we truly do see a lift in engagement when we look at anything that has a true map to store functionality.
Great. Maybe just to poll the room, if you guys could raise your hands, have you guys done location-based dynamic ads like this? Has anyone in the room executed this with your brands? So about half. Cool. So going a little bit deeper into a case study, this was a specific campaign for the 20-piece chicken McNuggets, simple objectives, in-store visits and purchase, the right partnership of geolocation, creative capabilities, what we say data-driven creative at scale. So some insights to share with you is that all consumers aren't the same. People have, you guys know this, people have a different mindset at lunch and dinner, and how you're feeling is completely going to depend on how you engage and your overall affinity towards the brand. So not only aren't all consumers the same, time of day influences that as well. And that will directly affect their engagement with your brand and their loyalty towards your brand. If you woke up on the wrong side of the bed one morning, you could have a bad taste in your mouth about whatever ad you get served. If you're having a great day, you just had a great meeting, you get out, you see something, you could have a much more positive feeling about it. So time of day definitely influences the way people engage and feel towards your brand. We've also found that consumers definitely respond more often and positively to location-based relevant advertising. So it's all about what's in it for me as a consumer. Give me something that's gonna provide value to me. So the location-based, you're a couple miles away from McDonald's, here's how you get there. Consumers like to see that and they'll engage with it more often. The other notion here, and this kind of speaks to InMobi's partnership with OMD and McDonald's, is that some advice we'd give to you guys is invest in longer term partnerships. So there are so many partners out there, especially in this room, that do this. Find a couple key ones and invest big with them. Your learnings are going to be stronger. We've had this partnership going for a while now, and we've been able to see huge improvement over the past 1.5 years. So from the time we started to now, we've helped increase in-store visitation by 10%. We've decreased cost per store visit by 5% and increased overall interaction and engagement by over 40%. So that's just about a company, an advertiser, and a partner working together, learning together, optimizing and improving. So Outside of McDonald's, we also wanted to share a couple other vertical examples of a way to use data and innovation to solve a brand problem. So let's talk about insurance. Insurance is all about protection. They want to protect their people, insure them. This is a really unique way to use data and innovation to do that. So this is a weather-triggered ad telling me if I was in Chicago, where I'm located, it's 48 degrees, it's about to rain, so valuable information to me, and a message from an insurance company that flooding's about to start, make sure you have your insurance, get a quote here. So this is an interesting way to use data and innovation together in the insurance space. The next example, I believe, is a video. You guys can play that. So this is for Magnum Mini, and it's a rich media example. It's a personality test. So they're asking you a couple questions about yourself. What would you lounge on? How would you spend your day? Reading a book on the computer. What's your fashion must-have? So sunglasses, a fancy fedora, watch. And from there, they tell you what flavor is good for you and share your moment and have a social call to action too. So sir, for a CPG company like Magnum, that's a great way to be relatable. So use that data and innovation to come up with a really cool execution to show the consumers that you know them and you know them as a brand, and then they'll immediately have that affinity with you. And then we have one more video for Target. So this is another rich media example by Target, basically showing consumers the clothes right off the runway models and giving you that easy path to purchase right from the ad unit, also driving you to the website. So retail brands are all about instant gratification. You see something, you actually see it on the runway model, where can I buy that? So this ad experience gives that consumer that immediate, this is what it is, here's how you can buy it. Similar to the Amazon.com model too. So just that easy instant gratification.
Okay, so the challenge. I think the biggest thing for us from a brand standpoint and agency is how do we balance the two? We are obviously always in the space trying to test and learn. How do you evaluate what the right test opportunity is? What are those KPIs that you want to measure coming out? It truly is a balancing act. It can no longer be data or creative. We now need to intersect the two, and I think brands are finally realizing this. I think there's a lot of brands that didn't even realize the amount of data that they sit on, and when you merge that with the data that comes out of media investment, it becomes a much more powerful story. And it really isn't one or the other. So I would say, for those of you in the room that are just now starting to think about how to marry the two, think about starting with audience insights. How do you identify your consumers differently? How do you message them differently? How do you make sure that the message is relevant to them? And then that becomes a really powerful story for hopefully, I guess, aligning with ultimately your KPIs and what your brand objectives are.
And just to wrap it up, and this is actually a notion that I've heard across all the presentations, is that idea of one-to-one relevant advertising. And I think it's really exciting that everyone's on board with that, and that's what everyone sees as the future, having that relevant one-to-one conversation with your consumer. So in other words, ensuring that consumers really do miss advertising if it's gone, so that we all have jobs forever. I think that's it.
Yep. Any questions?
Any questions? Coming your way.
Hi, Amanda, are you using any of the data that you're collecting from mobile to inform or help with the strategy for out-of-home or TV?
So I'd say we're not quite there yet. So not from an out-of-home. So out-of-home is actually more purchased on a local level right now. Are we trying to figure out how to marry and merge national and local investment to make us smarter as a whole? Yes. From a television standpoint, we're in discussions around programmatic television. Obviously with Comcast and NBC, they're doing testing. Samsung's doing testing all around understanding the in-home experience from a more traditional TV standpoint, but we're not yet at the point of being able to connect the two. I think the pipes are there on the back end from we do the DMP that we have, but we haven't fully been able to figure out how it all works together. And I think the hardest thing for traditional brands and those that have been in the space for so long and led with TV, because it really was the only media out there, is how to isolate the impact of one of the new media, such as digital, whether it be connected television, gaming consoles that are now becoming entertainment platforms, because you're never going to turn off what you've run from television. Now it's always going to come into effect in the way you adjust a media mix to align with the right audience. So our millennial media mix is very different than our 35 to 54 mix, but we will get there. I think we're all thinking about it. So if anyone has the answer to it, by all means, please share.
Anyone else?
Howdy. Quick question. You were talking about the level of specificity that you get with the user. I know we talked about this yesterday during the roundtable as well, but is that really expensive to do? Not just from a monetary standpoint, but from like a time perspective standpoint as well. Just trying to think of, you know, the results you shared were great, right? 10% up, 15% up, but then how much of an operational drain is that? Is that taking your focus away from other stuff?
Yeah, yes. So I think we all can agree that there's not enough time in the day to do everything. But I think that comes into play in terms of how we're structuring teams differently, right? So how do you put more focus from just a team that maybe was more focused on buying media and implementing it to making sure you have the right subsets and almost pods in a way that are focused on the measurement, to work with an investment team, to work with the strategy team, to work with our programmatic team within Omnicom, which is Analect and Acuant, to truly try to figure it out. But I also have to point out that we do it in partnership with our publishers. Our relationships are so strong that they truly are an extension of our team. And the only way we're ever going to truly be successful and make a difference for McDonald's is in full transparency. And I think that's why, as an example, and I know a lot of other great publisher relationships in the room that I work with, it is a constant open form of communication. We have to talk to each other, and we test and learn things together. And if a test doesn't go well, we learn something that we didn't know before, and we move on and we figure it out. But I can't do this without our publisher relationships being as strong as they are. So yeah, our team is changing by the day because the brand needs are changing.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Amanda.